Hello, hope you're having a great day. Doing a little something a little bit different today. I'm going to be going over my design document, which I've adapted into a slideshow format, and I'm going to be doing a monthly check-in based on what kind of progress has been made on the project so far, what kind of progress is anticipated long-term, and what my goals are for the near and far future. So, without any further ado, today is July 23rd, and this is the Town is Lava Development Tracker. Project-wide, we have a couple of goals and updates. First and foremost, I'm committing to a date, September 1st, wherein a playtesting build will be available for whoever wants to try it. So what I'm committing to here is that it's going to be a fully playable product with all the necessary features to get the idea of what the game is going to be about, and that's going to be available on September 1st, 2025. Next, I'm also committing to continuing to put out at least one devlog each week. Not a particularly thrilling or exciting commitment, but I do want to include that in this document nonetheless to keep myself honest. And lastly, next month I will have a string of days that will be completely free, and I intend to kind of do a little bit of a sprint where I will be developing for more hours than usual per day, and I will be live streaming each of those days if I can get everything set up properly. So look forward to that. It's probably going to be around the 13th, but I'll have specific details for that available in a future devlog, so I'm excited to do that. Now, just a couple of vital features for the game. This is going to be all of the features that are going to be in that build that's going to be available on September 1st, right? We're going to have player, uh, controls, and operations. We're going to have a gear system. We're going to have an adventurer system, an enemy system, a biome system, and individual interactable systems. Those will include storage, forge, journal, and workbench. A lot of that's going to sound familiar if you've been watching the other episodes, but we've got it all in a list right here. So now I'm going to run through each of those features and all of the sub-features each of those are expected to have, and the progress that I've got on each of those sub-features. Starting with the player. The player needs to be able to move, needs to be able to look around, needs to be able to hold up to one item in their hands, needs to be able to give and receive items, it needs to be able to identify interactables within its range, it needs to be able to interact with those interactables, and it needs to track score. All of this is done. Only thing that hasn't been implemented yet is the score tracking, and that's going to be, I could do that in 1 minute. So the next time I hop into Unity, that's going to be very easy to implement. So I'm very happy to say the player is just about feature complete. Moving on to the gear system. So we need a couple of things here. We need gear bases. A gear base is going to be the root attributes of a piece of gear, right? Like let's say we have an iron plate chest piece, iron plate chest. So the name iron plate chest, the image for an iron plate chest when I'm using assets, and to be clear, I do not expect to be using assets in this first build. That's going to be something that comes in the future if I decide to continue with the project beyond that point. But yes, it's going to be that. It's going to be the base attributes, like a level 1. It's going to have 5 defense, something like that. Those are the pieces of information that will be present in the gear bases, and that is completely implemented in the game already. I'm doing this by means of scriptable objects. The scriptable object is going to contain all this information, right? It's going to have the sprite or model for the piece of gear. It's going to have those root attributes, the name, description, etc. So that's done. The affixes, this is going to be the randomized pieces of the gear, right? Like let's say you have 10 different plate mails, or excuse me, iron plate chest pieces. Different ones are going to have different attributes. It's going to be things like fire resistance, pierce resistance, slash resistance. It could give you just a percentage boost to one of your stats, percent defense up, percent attack up. That wouldn't make sense on a chest, but that would be something that you would see on another piece of gear like a weapon. Percent attack up, percent specific type of attack up, or something like that. That is in progress. I have the ability to incorporate affixes, but I do not have a fleshed out system to assign them to appropriate pieces of gear and I do not have an appropriate system to randomize the generation of those, which you'll see is the next item on the list here, gear random generation. When enemies are spawned, when adventurers are spawned, and when enemies are killed, you're going to be when enemies are spawned, they're going to generate randomized gear bases, and that's going to be something that they can drop as part of their loot table. And then when they're killed, and if that gear is actually rolled as like a drop of loot that they're going to have, then it's also going to be randomizing the affixes for that piece of gear as it drops on the ground. So that needs to be implemented in terms of those features. So that's another thing to do. Going on to the adventurer. Features that we need for the adventurer to have. We need them to spawn with random attributes. What are those attributes? That's going to be what gear they start with and what they want to do first, right? And there will be game logic to this that is intended to be useful to the player in terms of deducing what to do for future adventurers that have not spawned or returned to town yet. Other randomized attributes, that's kind of it. It's going to be what gear they start with and what they want to start doing in terms of like, do I want to go north, south, east, west? Yeah, and that's it. Next is going to be gaining benefits from equipped gear. That's going to be you put gear on, and the stats that the gear's supposed to have are applied to the adventurer. That's done. That is feature complete. That feature is completely implemented. Next is going to be having a finite inventory. Right, you play something like Diablo. You have a grid of space, and you can put your items in that grid. You run out of space, you can't pick up any more items. So the finite inventory is, in a rudimentary sense, implemented on the adventurers, and it can store gear. So I guess in a sense this feature is complete. It's just not used in the present build of the game. So all I need to do is design the rest of the game to take advantage of the ability of those features, and then I can mark this as complete. Venturing into biomes, this is not started because the biome system has not been implemented yet. But the idea here, again, going back to the spawning with random attributes, is the adventurers are going to spawn. They're going to have their first town experience, and then they're just going to venture forth. They're going to leave town, and then they're going to go to the biome, and then whatever enemies are present in that biome, they're just going to start fighting and grinding. They're going to kill the enemies, get the gear, keep going until they either die or their bag is full, go back to town. The next one, which I just touched on, is returning to town. The adventurers will have two conditions during which they will return to town. If they die, they will return to town, or if their bag is full, they will return to town. Now, obviously, if they die, they're going to come back to town and they're going to be mad about it, and that's going to detract from your score. If they come back to town and their bag is full, that means that whatever you outfitted them with was successful, and they're going to be happy, and you're going to get a bonus to your score if that's the case. So that system needs to be implemented once the biome system is implemented. Fighting enemies, that's going to be enemy spawn, you engage them in combat, you attack them on a cadence based off of your attributes until one of the two of you dies, and then repeat. That's complete. Giving gear to the player, that's going to be them giving me gear in town to work on. That's complete. Now, what I should mention here is one thing that is of note. When they come back and their inventories are full, obviously they give me the piece of gear that they're wearing, and I hold that and I can perform operations on it. But also, when they have a complete inventory, there's going to be like they can give me like a sack that has all of the inventory contents in one item. So I pick up the sack, and then it's going to have all their stuff, and I could just take it to storage and deposit it in there, or I could look at the contents of the sack. So I did not take note of that, but that is a feature that needs to be implemented. Giving vague information to the player, that's going to be part of the deductive process of interacting with these adventurers, right? By design, these adventurers are going to be very not helpful in terms of letting you know specifically what the problem is, and this is a design choice intended to represent that adventurers are only good at adventuring, and they're not good at telling why they are or are not succeeding. That's going to be your job as the blacksmith. So this is partially complete. I am able to have the adventurers provide information to the player via dialogue. So that feature is implemented, but more details beyond that, not implemented. That's going to have a dependency also on the spawning with random attributes piece and the venturing into biomes piece. And lastly is going to be the adventurer providing the player with points and then feedback once when you fulfill their order in town, right? So they submit their order, they're sitting there impatiently waiting at the front desk for you to finish their order, and then once you give them the fulfillment of their order, then they will have something to say about it. If you were quick, they will be happy and they'll give you a good rating and you'll get a lot of points. If you took a little bit too long, they're going to be upset about it, and the opposite will happen. They will give you fewer points and they will have unhappy things to say to you. All right. Next features enemies. This one shares a lot in common with the adventurers, and they also share a lot of interfaces which implement those same features. For example, we have spawning with random attributes based on biome. That is in progress, right? I am able to spawn enemies, again with scriptable objects for the enemies, with specific attributes which can scale up with level, right? So let's say we have a level 1 goblin, has 5 attack, gains 10 attack every level, or something like that. That is already implemented, that's good to go. But the biome system is not implemented, so there is a dependency on that being implemented before I can complete this first item. Next up is spawning with random gear and item drop chances. This is partially complete, right? There is already in the scriptable object for the enemies fields where I can put any number of scriptable objects representing the items and gear that they can drop. And here's a good time I can talk about what the difference between items and gear is. Gear is going to be just pieces of gear, right? Obviously, chainmail, a sword, boots, anything like that. Whereas items are going to be components that you can put into gear, and we'll get into this a little bit more later. But this could be something like iron, or it could be something like an ore. It could be something like a rune that provides a magical benefit. So the enemies are able to hold these things, and they are able to drop them based off of a percentage chance on death. But the system to actually spawn the enemies randomly based off of biome, that's not implemented yet, so in progress. Fighting adventurers, complete, that's done. It's the exact same code that the adventurers are using, as a matter of fact. So one to one, it works. Drop random gear and items on death, that's done. Yep, we talked about that a little bit earlier, about how they are able to have loot tables already, and when they are defeated, they will randomly choose from the loot table. All right, next feature is biomes. This is not implemented at all. It is not in the game whatsoever, so it's just a to-do on everything here. But what we're going to have in here is going to be, every time you start a new game, biome layout's going to be completely different, right? One game, perhaps you have swamps to the right or to the east. You'll have tundra to the north, and forest to the west, and desert to the south. And then the next game, completely different from that. But anyway, yeah, on the start of the game, going to randomize those layouts, and then the biome is also going to be responsible for spawning enemies. When adventurers venture into those biomes, the enemies will be specific to biomes. So, for example, let's take a sample enemy goblins. Those could only spawn out of the environments from above. They could spawn perhaps in swamps, and also they could possibly spawn in mountains, and also they could possibly spawn in forests. So there will be a bit of a deductive process here, right? You go into a specific biome, and you know what enemies could be there, but you don't know specifically which one will be there. And on the other hand, your adventurers come back to town, it's obvious that they've been fighting a specific type of enemy. For example, if they've been fighting slimes, there will be corrosive damage that they've been taking, and there will be corrosive damage to their gear. So you will know that they were fighting slimes, but you may not know exactly specifically which biome they were in that had slimes until you get more information later. So anyway, that is to be done. That's going to be mostly a design thing and not a development thing, and balancing pools of enemies and pools of biomes, and making for a rich deductive process to determine what's where and what to gear your adventurers with to be ready to fight it. And then lastly, scaling with difficulty over time. So that's going to be a fail state of the game. In fact, I think that will be the only fail state of the game. Is over time the biomes will get harder and the enemies will get more powerful and more plentiful. And if you're not kitting your adventurers out adequately, that they can keep up with this, you're going to lose the game. You will not lose the game if an adventurer falls in battle; they'll just come back to town. But if you are unable to fight the enemies at all, and the difficulty overwhelms you, which I will have to define a fail state for that once this is implemented to begin with, that will be the game over state of the game. All right. Moving into the interactables, there's going to be subsections here for each of them. First off, we have the storage. It's just going to be a big old chest. It's going to store a finite amount of materials. Again, materials, that's going to be pieces of ore, pieces of metal ingots. It's going to be special magical items like gems and runes. And then also it's going to store the finite amount of pieces of gear, right? You're just going to have X amount of slots where you could put pieces of gear that either you want to extract something from later, you don't want to forge it right away, or you want to perhaps equip a different adventurer with it. So that's in progress, right? I have it capable of storing pieces of gear, but I don't have a system that I'm actually happy with, right? So it can do it. I'm just not happy with how it can do it, if that makes sense. And then next, I want it to, when the player interacts with it, I want it to be able to open a window pane, or excuse me, a UI pane that is going to contain a list, a visual representation of all the materials and pieces of gear that are present in it. The player can hover over those with their cursor and see the attributes of those pieces of those items. And they can also withdraw an item if their hands are not full. They can take an item out, or they can take materials out, a stack of materials, and then they can also deposit, same way. All right, so that's in progress, right? The player is able to interact with it, but the rest of the implementation needs to be coded in. A lot of the code can be reused, right? Like the forge, you're able to put things in the forge, you can reuse that exact same code and just add to it for storage specific stuff. And that's going to be true for all of these. So I'll just not repeat myself when that comes up in the future. All right, so for the forge, the purpose here is you're going to you put pieces of gear into the forge, and then as soon as you put it in there, it's done. You can't take it back out. So there's no taking stuff. There's no taking gear out of the forge. You put gear in, specifically just gear, and then it'll burn it down. And then if the gear had any materials in it, any gems, any runes, those will be destroyed in the forge. And then you'll get raw materials out. So you put an iron plate chest piece in that we talked about earlier. X amount of time will pass. There will be like a timer. And then after X amount of time has passed, you will get an appropriate amount of iron ingots out of the forge corresponding to whatever piece you put in, right? So in a way, this is basically just when you're playing an ARPG and you go to the Diablo and you hit the salvage button and you get like iron or cloth or whatever. That's this, but fleshed out for the purposes of this game. So when you interact with the forge, it will open a menu that will allow you to deposit gear. It will allow you to withdraw materials, and it'll allow you to just monitor the progress of everything. So there's going to be UI elements of like the things that are deposited. It's going to be progress bars of the destruction of those pieces of gear. Yep, that's the forge. All right, and I'm sorry if the baby crying is coming through, by the way. Unfortunately, I have no way of blocking that out, but he's safe and happy. He's with his mama. All right. For the journal, this is not implemented yet, but this is going to be sort of a combination of like all the information that the player gains about the world over the course of a playthrough. So it's going to track biome locations, right? We're going to see what's to the north, what's to the south, what's to the east, what's to the west. How is that going to be tracked? Well, it's going to be deductively, right? So if we learn what enemies are to the north, then we know what the north cannot be, because if we know X enemy cannot spawn in Y biome, then we can rule it out. So we know what's not going to be there. So over time, as you gain more and more information, you'll be able to mark things off until you know which biomes are where. Same thing with the enemies, right? You'll as you learn which enemies are where, you'll be able to mark that in the map. Um, you'll know what enemies are dropping what kind of loot the enemies are dropping, what kind of special materials they're dropping, what kind of special materials the biome has, right? So some enemies will have items specific to themselves, but also some enemies will have items specific to the biome that they're in. So there's going to be kind of that combination of things that you can take note of in your journal. And you'll also just be taking note of enemies' strengths and weaknesses, right? So you'll like if fire damage is effective against the enemies in this biome, you'll take note of that. If enemies are doing fire damage in this biome, you'll also take note of that, just so you can better equip your adventurers. So just tracking all that information. So when interacted with, or when a hotkey is pressed, I want to open up a menu. It'll just be like a book, and you can flip through the pages or the tabs um, to see all the information that you need to see. So I'm able to open the window uh, when the player interacts with it. I don't have a hotkey for it at this time. This would be a relatively easy implementation, I anticipate. So that can be a quick thing to sneak in. That's the journal, and there's one last update here, and then that'll be it for the presentation. So the workbench is going to be the meat and potatoes of the gameplay of the game. The other meat and potatoes being the deductive process going into the decision making that you do. So in the workbench, you will submit materials and pieces of gear. It will hold both. And then you will do operations on the pieces of gear. What are those operations? Well, one, most simply, you can use materials with no gear submitted to create gear, right? Let's say I have 3 iron ingots. I can use those 3 iron ingots to make a base copy of iron plate. No affixes, just a base copy. This is going to be something that you're going to be doing at the beginning of every game, right? Adventurers have no gear, so you'll just be kitting them out with a basic piece of gear. Um, Another operation that you can perform is going to be putting a piece of gear on the table and extracting something from it. That piece of gear has a magical property, right? Like, well, all the affixes will be represented by stuff on the gear, right? It's going to be coming from runes, it's going to be coming from gems, it's going to be coming from just engineered quirks. Like, there's a particular way that the piece of gear is constructed that is not typical. Those are going to be represented by quirks on the gear that you can remove. That's going to be one of the key operations you take on gear, right? You find a piece of, you find a component on the piece of gear that you really want. You will spend time as a player excising that from the piece of gear instead of just tossing it right in the forge straight away. And then you will be placing that in your storage so that you can pick it back up later if you have a piece of gear you want to use it on. Another thing that you'll be able to do is add those components to other pieces of gear, obviously. And that's kind of it. That's going to be the big stuff you're going to be doing at the workbench. And the only other thing to be done here is going to be having mini games for these activities, right? So it's going to be a combination of player engagement and also time, right? I want it needs to take time to do these things because there needs to be a realistic compromise of how strong you want to make a piece of gear versus how much time you're willing to spend on doing so. Uh, and there you go. That is the update for the workbench, and also that is the conclusion of the presentation. So I will be doing another such presentation as this 1 month from now, August 23, time permitting, and I will look forward to providing a future devlog no later than this time next week. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.